Welcome to Weasel Digital, and welcome to So You Wanna Fly. So You Wanna Fly is a series of quick start videos for rookie pilots that are looking for some quick builds and some quick advice to make them better pilots. Before we get into today's episode about the X-Wing, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Famous Bale's authentic Alderaanian Killick barbecue, where every bite has that smoky homeworld flavor of Alderaan. So with that, let's get right down to the meat of it. The T-65b X-Wing. The backbone starfighter of the Rebel fleet, the T-65b X-Wing is an all-purpose starfighter that can definitely strike down enemy TIEs as well as capital ships. And this is the jack of all trades, master of none type ship. It is a great all-around fighter. It can actually be flown right as it is fairly effectively. It is the ship that I would recommend for any rookie pilot that's new to the game. The X-Wing is just kind of solid all around. As we can see, it's got a hull of 1200, max shields of 800, max speed of 145, max acceleration of 160, and a maneuverability of 75. Now, for those numbers, we're looking at about tied for fourth in your hull. Your third lowest shields if you discount those ships that have no shields. It does have the third fastest speed, the fifth fastest acceleration, and the sixth fastest maneuverability. So, when you think about those numbers, fourth, fifth, sixth, when we're talking out of 10 ships, this really is kind of the middle of the road across the board. Because of that, again, it makes a great ship for beginners. Now, we're not going to tweak these numbers all that much in a few of our builds. The builds for this are pretty simple, pretty easy to put together, so that you can just get out there and fly and do what you want to do. The first one we're going to look at is going to be a build for dogfights or for dogfighting in fleet battles. Now, one thing to know about this ship is, while it is kind of a jack of all trades, it also has the highest selection overall of modifications. There are a ton of shields, a ton of engines, a ton of hull choices, a lot of auxiliary weapons, a lot of primary weapons to look at and choose from. So you can really fine-tune and tweak this as you get more comfortable with it. But I'm going to be looking at just some quick, easy builds for new players to help them get off the ground and going. As far as our primary weapon for our first build, our dogfighting build, we're going to stick with the standard laser cannon. Now, certainly there are some other choices. The burst cannon does more damage. However, it has less ammo. It's going to eat through that ammo quickly. And since those shots go out in a 4-burst hit, if you miss with that burst, you've lost your damage. Whereas your standard laser cannon is firing a very consistent rate of shots, and it'll help you kind of gauge where you're shooting, lead your targets properly, and at least assure that you're going to get some damage on the target. So we're going to be sticking with that standard laser cannon. For our left auxiliary, we're going to be keeping our astromech repair. 1200 hull gives us a lot of hull. The 800 shields will regen over time as long as we're not blown up. This repair droid heals 400 health, or 1/3 of your overall hull, and it has a cooldown of 30 seconds. So this can be used multiple times through battle to keep repairing your ship up. Really helps with the longevity of this fighter. Our other auxiliary, we're going to be sticking with our concussion missile. A good all-around weapon. Fairly short lock-on time, nice, real short cooldown, fairly high ammo capacity. This works good for not only combating enemy fighters, but also for throwing on some extra damage against enemy capital ships. Countermeasures, the Seeker warheads are the best all around. We're going to be sticking with those. For our hull, there's really one choice that beats the others, and that's the dampener hull. Hostile lock time is increased by 100%, which means it takes twice as long for enemies fighter pilots to lock on you with their missiles. That gives you a lot more time to try to shake them or to prepare to use your countermeasures.
That'll be fun.
For shields, there's a real good option here, and that's the ray shields. The ray shields reduce the primary damage you take by 25%. So that's blaster fire against your ship is reduced by 25%. That's going to give you a lot more longevity in battle. It does increase your auxiliary damage taken, so that's your missiles, by 50%. However, again, the dampener hull makes the enemy take twice as long to get that lock on you. And you have the seeker warheads, which are excellent anti-missile protection. So that combination really helps to make you hard to lock on for missiles and reduce main weapon fire damage. So that's really helpful. For our engines, we're going to stick with the sublight engines. As you progress and get better, I would suggest maybe looking at the micro thrust engines for your dogfighter build, especially in dogfight mode. It does lower your speed and acceleration considerably, but it increases your maneuverability, which means tighter turns, easier time tracking targets, easier time, avoiding fire too. So that's a pretty good dogfighting weapon. But for our beginner build, we're going to stick with our standard engines. So altogether there, the only changes we've made is the hull and the shields. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard fighter. Now, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how to use this later. But this is our first dogfighter, kind of standard across the board build. Works also pretty well in fleet battles. The only big change is we lose 120 health, but we gain that slow hostile lock time. The second build I'm going to talk about is a little more advanced build, but might help, especially if you have trouble hitting targets. In dogfighting scenarios, with all the ships whizzing by really quickly, it can be hard to track those targets and get damage on. So we're going to change things a little bit here. The main change we're going to do is right here with our secondary auxiliary weapon. And with that, we're going to switch over to our ion missile. The ion missile has a really fast lock-on time of 1 second. Has a lock-on range of 1,500 meters, which means you can start that lock-on from a long ways away. So if you're in a jousting situation, you got to target a far ways that's coming towards you. You can get this lock on, fire that missile off, and they'll be floating dead in the water when you reach that optimum range. Now, it does have 6 ammo, but it has a very long cooldown of 20 seconds. That's really the only downside of this. What this ion missile does is if the enemy you're facing has shields, it will disable their shields. It'll also disable their entire ship, whether they have shields or not. So they'll lose their shields and they'll be floating dead in the water. This makes them a very easy target to hit. They can't fire back at you. They can't maneuver to avoid fire. They're just going to float in a straight line. So, by using those ion missiles, you're able to do a lot of damage. Now, this is a situation where you could switch up to that burst cannon, but that might hurt you in regular combat. The plasburst laser cannon, also a decent choice since those guys are going to be disabled. But I think really your best option is probably still sticking with the standard laser cannon for now. For your hull and your shields, I would change those just like we did the other one. So the only thing we're doing is swapping out that concussion missile for our ion missile. And your goal here is to hit your target with that ion missile, kill them with your laser cannon. Then you're going to go back to fighting other targets for a while you wait for that ion missile to recharge. Once it's off cooldown, you're going to pick a new target, disable, and destroy. That one is good in dogfights. It's also good in fleet battles. And in fleet battles, you can use that ion missile to help destroy the shields of capital ships also. Nice little secondary effect. Now the third build I'm going to talk about is a little more tricky. So a little more unique, a little more advanced. We're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to take our burst cannon. We're not going to be building this to attack enemy fighters, so we're not worried about accuracy that much. We are going to be taking our, this one, the proton torpedo. And we're going to be taking the piercing torpedo. Countermeasures are going to stay seeker warhead. Our hull is going to actually be changed to the reinforced hull. And for shields, we are going to stick with the ray shields. For our engines, we are going to go with the thrust engines. Nice. Now you see, for the first time, this is really going to change the stats on this fighter. We're going to increase our hull considerably, giving us much more survivability. We're going to have our max shields unchanged. Our max speed goes up by a large portion. We lose acceleration maneuverability, but neither of those are going to be all that useful for this build. This build is a fleet battle only build. The purpose of this build is to specifically target components on the enemy capital ship, on that Star Destroyer. We'll be talking about that a little bit more later, but this proton torpedo does 4,000 damage, has a lock-on time of 2 seconds, cooldown is only 10 seconds, which is nice and quick, but you only have 2 shots. Does have a lock-on range of 1,500 meters. The piercing torpedo, similar stats in a lot of ways. Fairly quick lock-on time of 1.3 seconds. Same lock-on range restrictions of 1,500 meters for your lock-on, minimum range of 500. Cooldown is 8 seconds, which is pretty quick. 3 ammo capacity, so fairly low. And the damage is 2,000, but it does pierce the shields. This is an all-around target bomber for specifically the Star Destroyer. This is used to specifically knock out those shield generators. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. So those are our 3 builds. We have our standard build with our standard kind of outlay of equipment. We've changed our dampener hull and our ray shield. We have our secondary dogfighting build, which swaps out the concussion missile for ion missiles. And then we have a bomber build, built specifically to target the components of the Star Destroyer. So with that, we'll switch over to some in-game play to show you how best to utilize these. Now our first build, the concussion missile build, is a straight-up dogfighter. You're simply going to fly out, engage targets, get your missile lock-ons, fire your missiles, continue to do damage. There's nothing really surprising about this build. It's straightforward, it's simple, it's easy to fly, it's easy to use. If you happen to be out of good targets to shoot at in a fleet battle, you can of course always go after capital ships, do some damage. I would try to reserve your missiles for when the shields are down on capital ships. They'll be more effective that way. Blaster fire works all the time. In fleet battles, you can also spend some spare time if you don't have any good targets, shooting at AI fighters. Remember, every time you deploy and anytime you have a short break between combat, you should be recharging your shields to make sure you have the most survivability possible.
They just got lucky.
Now for our ion missile build. This one doesn't play significantly different from the concussion missile build, except for the ion missiles. As you see, we hit the TIE fighter, it's now flying dead in the water, and it becomes an easy target to hit and destroy. Now it does have a long cooldown before you get another one of those, so then you simply go back to regular dogfighting. This is an effective combination in either dogfight matches or in fleet battle. This build is also effective at taking down capital ships' shields. Those ion missiles do 6,000 damage, ion damage, which does a significant amount of damage to raiders, to the light cruisers, and even the shields on the Star Destroyer. So feel free to use those against those targets. Now it's time to take a look at our bomber build. Again, this is specifically used for taking down the Star Destroyer. When you start off, you're going to want to take a long arc all the way to the edge of the map if necessary. It's perfectly fine. You're then going to turn towards the Star Destroyer, and you're going to target one of the shield bubbles. The shield generators are the parts of the ship that regenerate their shields. So taking those out is key. You'll fly in at full speed while charging engines. If you watch the damage down there for the shield generator, you'll see that just dropped in half. Now this is a practice mode. They're not that effective in actual fleet battles. But the practice remains the same. Fly in from long distance. Once you get to 1,500 meters, you'll start locking. Then you can just boost away from combat. One of your missiles will impact on the shields and do shield damage. The other one will penetrate the shields and do damage to the actual target. If your team has disabled the shields temporarily, or you've taken out all the shield generators and are targeting other targets, then both of your missiles will hit the target and do considerable amounts of damage. Again, the plan is from long range at high speed with powered engines, approach till 1,500 meters, get your locks, fire, and boost away. Now it's best if under fire, you want to wait until you get to as close to 500 meters as possible before you fire the missiles. This will give the enemy less time to counter those missiles. When I'm playing defense, I like to target players' missiles to reduce their effectiveness. As you saw there, one of my missiles got shot out. When you do your passes, make sure you use your boost to go past 1,500 meters, which is the effective range of the capital ship. Then start your turn to make your next approach. This ship has very low maneuverability and extremely low acceleration, but has high speed. So it's very hard to slow down and be effective. As you saw there, one of the missiles impacted on the shields, the other one hit the shield generator. Now, if you run out of missiles, or you're under heavy fire and you're not going to survive much longer, the best thing you can do with this build is not to try to retreat back for health, but it's to just make an attack run on the shield generators or some other part of the ship, doing damage with blasters, whatever missiles you have left, and just do what you can before you get blown up. So, with those builds spelled out for you, with those demonstrations of how those different builds operate in combat, you should be better prepared to use that X-Wing in both fleet battles and in dogfight matches. And I do highly recommend this X-Wing fighter for new players. It is a great all-around ship. It's easy to fly. It's going to make sure that you're at least somewhat effective in combat, which is what I want to see out of rookie players. I want to see you doing something, getting some assists, getting some kills, doing some damage, helping out in some way. Then you're a positive influence on the team, and that's a wonderful thing. So with that, I hope I'll see you out there in space. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Authentic Alderaanian Killick barbecue. Where do you think they even source Killick anymore? I thought they were native to Alderaan. Are they substituting it with Ewok now or something? I mean, really, what are you going to use? It's a little smoky taste of your homeworld. That seems like that's too soon. Ugh, who wrote that?